document that need to be put up on the screen should be deferred to a later stage when the technical glitch is fixed. Council Son Arun, good morning, Mr. President, good morning, Your Honors, and very good morning, Mr. P. Poon. I am Son Arun, representing Nuon Chia with my colleague. I have a few questions to put to you as follows. Mr. P. Poon, you told the prosecutors on the 25th of July 2012 that you saw the revolutionary flag and youth magazines. My question is, did you ever read, or have you really seen the magazines, and how many copies of them have you seen? Response. I have read them because the materials were distributed to us. When they were distributed, we were supposed to read the whole books and then kept them aside. Question. Could you tell the court the type of revolutionary flags? Was it in the form of a magazine, a journal, and was the text typed or handwritten? Response. What I saw was that on the cover there was a revolutionary flag and youth magazines. They made into books with the title as indicated, the revolutionary flag and revolutionary youth magazines. With regard to the color, I don't remember the detail, but I think the flag was red. Question. I asked you another question as well, but you didn't answer. The question was whether the text in that book was written or hand or typed. Response. On the cover page, I do not know whether it was the handmade work, but it appears to me that the cover page, the picture on the cover page was drawn by hand rather than by printing. Question. What about the text? The text inside, you said you read them. Was it handwritten or typed? Response. It was printed before it could be made into books. Question. You read the revolutionary and youth magazines, the revolutionary flag and youth magazines. In which year did you read them? Response. I read them from 1977. I don't remember whether it was early 1977 or late 1977. But I remember that the copies were distributed to all ministries. I read about the movement, the actual movement within the country. I remember reading the parties building and other detailed aspects of that in the book. And I read the comments made by visiting guests and delegates in Cambodia during that time. Question. Do you recall who wrote the magazines and who was actually the author of these magazines? Response. I don't know who wrote the revolutionary flag magazines and the youth flag magazines. I don't know. Counsel. Thank you. In your response to the prosecutor after the 17th of March 1970, you mentioned about the spacious area in the northeast. Could you please be more precise on that? Response. I was referring to the wider liberated zones. During the sessions, we were told that in Ratanakiri and Mandolkiri, the areas were completely liberated. In Preavihir, the area in Preavihir was also completely liberated. So we were told that the liberated zone now was expanded widely and there would be no further obstacle. There was no area left to be under control of the enemies because we controlled the whole area already.
Thank you. Also, you told the court that at that time there were American bombardment, heavily American bombardment. Do you know the reason for such a bombardment? Were there any infantry, American infantry on the ground as well as the Vietnamese troops? On this point, the bombardment started in 1962. It was dropped on the residential villages where people were living, namely the name of Nhang. Now it is known as Nhang Commune. happened to that village now? Maybe that territory is now part of the Vietnamese territory. Those 7 or 8 villages now belong to Vietnam. I refer to the land where we did the farming on. That's point number 1. And since the bombardment also continued in 64, 65, through to 67, 68, and 69, and the bombardment was even intensified in 69. I here refer to the bombardment on the Cambodian territory that is a part of the Ratanakiri province, in Loa village, in Nhang village, in Tranga village, half of it was destroyed, and Kon village was half destroyed as well. And Mui village was also destroyed in half. So these 4 or 5 villages were destroyed. During the 1968 and 69, even the rice field had been bombarded heavily. We did not know why they were angry and dropped those bombs. There were various types of planes, including C-130, and they dropped the bombs at those villages. Cattle, in one day, more than 1,000 cattle were strafed and died in the rice field. I did not know the reason of such anger by the American and why they dropped those bombs. In fact, starting from 1964, villagers did not stay in the village. They were afraid, so they went and stayed in the jungle because of such a heavy bombardment. Thank you. You just stated that you did not know the reason for the bombardment. And later on, have you come aware of the reason that is at a later stage, not at the time of the bombardment? At that time, the local government had not yet been formed, as we did not have any conflict with the American government. So please tell us if you know the reason for such a bombardment at a later stage. Answer. Later on, I knew of the reasons. Number 1 was for them to track down the Viet Cong troops. And because they noticed that Vietnamese people residing along the Vietnam-Cambodian territory and took refuge in part of the Cambodian territory, that's why they dropped the bombs. Thank you. Before and during or after the bombardment, did you ever see the American infantry or the Vietnamese troops entering Cambodian territory? Response. In fact, there was no Viet Cong troops mixing within the village. Previously, I said that there were North Vietnamese troops in 1963 and 64, but they only transited through the territory and they made it as quietly as possible. They actually went and transit through the forest as they gathered people to make a path through the jungle. Actually, it was initially just a footpath, but later on you could travel by bicycle through that path. And they also used the path or trail to carry rice for the soldier supply. Thank you. When the Americans bombarded the Cambodian territory, can you estimate how deep or how far was the bombardment within the Ratnagiri province? Response: where I lived, initially, first they bombarded to the south of the Sesan River. It was rather deep inside the country, but I could not estimate how many kilometers. It could be 10 to 15 kilometers further into the Cambodian territory, or up to 30 kilometers. Also, the bombardment was in Bo Cao and Ban Lung, which was deep inside the Cambodian territory. Thank you. Mr. Witness, you said you joined the revolution in 1963. At that time, did you know whether those who joined the revolution, including yourself, armed? Were you armed, and were they all armed? Answer: when I joined the revolution in 1963 and up to 1966, 67, I was armed only in late 1967. Here I only talked about myself. It was en pied, a kind of gun. And then I carried 16th, or in French, 36. Rather, it's 36. But as I stated, when I joined, I did not have any or carry any weapon. Only later on in 67 or 1968 that I was armed. Because at that time the mobile unit was also armed, and I was armed. Initially, my office did not have any weapons, but Vietnamese troops who passed through the area, they were exhausted and they wanted some food. They wanted pork or dog meat, so then they exchanged the meat with their weapons. And that's how it happens that we got into possessions of those weapons. So later on, gradually we were in more possession of those weapons through the exchange with the Vietnamese troops. Question: so those weapons, as armed by those who joined the revolution, were bought of the Vietnamese troops or by any other means. Is that correct? Yes. In Ratnagiri province, starting from 1968, we already had in our possession our manually loaded guns. So we made those customized guns by ourselves manually. Thank you. On the 26th of July this year, in response to the prosecution, you said Son Sen was the chief of the special zone. Can you clarify further? Was it him who was in charge of the special zone, or was it somebody else? Response. I think it could be mistaken. I did not say Son Sen was the special zone. It was actually Von Wait who was the chief of the special zone. Son Sen was actually in charge of military since he had been in Ratnagiri province. First, the mobile unit, and then he moved to the Kampong Thom battlefield. Thank you. You also informed the court that in 1972 you accompanied Noon Chia to Samlot. Before you accompanied him, where were you? Because you also informed the chamber that you were the bodyguard of Pol Pot. And how come you instead accompanied Noon Chia to Samlot? Regarding this point, Noon Chia, Pol Pot, and Khieu Samphan were together at the time. And because I was there too, and sometimes I accompany Pol Pot, and at the time I accompany Noon Chia, and that was in 1972. When you accompanied Noon Chia to Samlot, can you recall whether it was a mission that is his official mission, or what was the purpose of his journey? Answer. I already replied earlier that I accompanied him to carry out his task at the west and the southwest zones, and also he went to work in the northwest zone, as that's what I described earlier. Let me go back a little bit. When the Americans conducted heavy bombardments in Ratnagiri, that is, tons of bombs were dropped, were people injured and died? Do you touch touch upon the issue, but I would like you to clarify a little bit further. As you said, cattle died. How about human lives? Were there any lost? As for human lives, when we were in the village and we was not aware of the bombardment, I refer to 1962, some villagers were injured and died. But the bombardment in 1969, that is after the continuation of bombardments, we learned we get used to it. So when there was bombardment in the village, we would flee into the jungle, and we would avoid any injury. But as for the cattle were grazing in the rice field, and they died. So usually at that big rice field, after we harvested the crops, the cattle were left there. And yes, a lot of cattle died as a result of the bombardment. That was the second phase of the bombardment. And the third bombardment, which was in 1973, that is in Tanga village. One big family composing of 31 members was completely killed, and they were my relative. Thank you. During the heavy bombardment by the Americans in Ratanakiri province, did you observe any American infantry or Vietnamese troops or any other soldiers entered into Ratanakiri province and make their base there, or they just dropped the bombs and they left? After the bombardments, they would go back, but I did not know where they would return. I only heard from other people that they returned to their base in Prey Nogo. Or maybe they returned to their base in Tapao, that is in Thailand. In 1966, they made their base in two locations. One was at Nhang village. I refer to the American infantry. They made their base in that village. And another base was made at the Tanga village. But they did not stay for long. From what we knew, at that time, and that's the information second hand, that the Vietnamese troops actually shot down 6 planes. So at that time, they were also bombarding the Vietnamese troops and also encroaching in our Cambodian territory. Thank you. You've been here on several days now, testifying before this court, and you always refer to Pol Pot as Bong Pol Pot, or brother number 1, and Nuon Chea as a brother number 2. Can you clarify why you refer to Pol Pot as brother number 1 and Nuon Chea as brother number 2? Is it a well-known fact, or it is your custom or your personal habit in calling them such a title? Let me clarify this point, says the witness. When we were in the jungle, I did not refer to them by such a title. At that time, I call him Bong. However, starting from 1974, that is after Udong town had been liberated, I actually heard Bong Pong saying that Pol Pot was now known as number 1, and Nuon Chea was known as number 2. And from that on, it was known as number 1 and number 2. Because we did not want to refer to them by using the name, the real name, so we just use number 1 and number 2. Thank you. So it means the title brother number 1 and number 2 were designated by Pong. Is that correct? I did not know whether it was Pong who came up with such a title, but as Pong was our superior, and that's what he told me. I did not know whether themselves designated such a title and passed it on to him. Thank you. Since mid-1973, did you know whether the Khmer Rouge troops fought and reached the Kampong Cham provincial town? Yes, I knew about that. At that time, one of the main target was to liberate Kampong Thom province, because there is a location called Tropang Weng, which was a vast location. But then the troops were transferred to attack the other location in 1973, aiming to completely liberate that location, and we were in control of all the textile factories at the time. And with another spearhead coming from the river, I passed through the area at the time, and there was a fighting in Kampong Cham province. Those troops coming from Ratanakiri, mainly they were ethnic minorities 60 of them died, and they were buried at a Steng Trong location. And they actually built a small memorial symbol in respect of those ethnic minority soldiers who died. Thank you. What I want to know is in regards to the refugees. That is, after the intensified attack at the Kampong Cham provincial town, those residents in the provincial town and in the nearby vicinity were gathered up. Do you know what happened to them or where they had been taken to? During the fight at the Kampong Cham provincial town, it seems that there had been no evacuation as we did not control the town for long, because we withdrew and then the people came back into town. We were in control only for a short period of time. During the attack on Kampong Cham provincial town, were senior leaders, including Nuon Chea, Pol Pot, and Son Sen, where were they? Ông Pol Pot, ông Nuon Chea, were in the office near office S71, because at that time there were many mobile offices. As for Son Sen, he was at Bok Knau. That was his headquarters there. Question. So during the intensified attack on the Kampong Cham provincial town, was it commanded by Son Sen himself? Because the soldiers or the troops belongs to the center and the 304. Thank you. Now I move on to another topic. During the past few days that you have been testifying before this chamber, it seems that you were so close to Ông Nuon Chea and to have worked with him, probably as much as you have worked with Pol Pot. Because you always mention when there was Pol Pot, there would be a Pol Pot and a Khieu Samphan. My question is the following. Did you know Nuon Chea well? That is his behavior, his attitude, and everything else, or his personality. Since I had known him, I considered him as one of the leaders that I loved and respect, and that I would serve him from the bottom of my heart. When it when it comes to his personality, he is an educated person. He is humble and gentle, and he knew about the Buddhist disciplines. He was well educated into Buddhist religion. That's how I observed.
Question. Some people alleged that Mr. Nuon Chea is a cruel person, a person of barbaric nature, although he was educated, and that Nuon Chea ordered the arrest and executions of some people. According to your knowledge, and as you already indicated about his personality, characteristic, was he the person as alleged? The president intervenes. Witness is now instructed not to respond to the question because it is not in the capacity of the witness to respond to a question that is to express his own view because he is not an expert on this. Counsel, thank you, Mr. President. I may now proceed to another question. You already testified before the chamber that you attended meetings and study sessions with senior leaders. Did you ever hear that these senior leaders in these study sessions or meeting, including Pol Pot, Nuon Chea, Khieu Samphan, talked about smash, about arrest, all sort of things like this? Response. I attended study sessions and already stated time and again that during study sessions we were briefed on the internal and external situation, the organizational aspect, the victories over this and that battle, and that there were progressive cooperatives in this location and in that location. When it comes to documents relevant to smashing people in the study sessions, I do not recollect having seen or being handed out such documents. We were indeed taught in the sessions on how to find out our weaknesses and strength, and we were asked to be open to criticism and be criticized by others, and that we need to correct ourselves after being criticized and extract lessons learned from the sessions. Counsel, thank you. On the 18th and 19th of April 1975, when the troops attacked Phnom Penh, at that time, Phnom Penh was attacked by the the army, by the troops, and you already stated about this. My question to you is, were you aware where Nuon Chea was located during that time? Did you join the other commanders in the attack, or you were elsewhere? Response: I already told the court on this that Pol Pot was at Dok Tao office before the attack of Phnom Penh happened. Nuon Chea was at the other side of the river because there were a few offices at Thnal Bombay and also at Y1. Also, there was an office in 74 location, but I did not know where he was located. I remember that immediately after the attack, everyone met in a gathering. Question: may I seek a point of clarification? When the attack happened in Phnom Penh, you went to Phnom Penh with Son Sen. So my question is, do you know where Nuon Chea was at that time? Indeed, you said that he could have been in other location, although you don't have enough information on this, but where was he at that time? Response: I don't have any information to support my knowledge of where he was, except where Pol Pot was, which I know. Counsel: thank you. Mr. Witness, you knew Son Sen very well. Son Sen was the Minister of National Defense and National Security. Son Sen was the minister. Ieng Sary was the Minister of Foreign Affairs. But the second person in command to Son Sen was So Hong. Rather, says counsel, I would like to know who was in the second command from or to Son Sen. Response: there were people like Bong Mate, Bong Tien, Bong Nat, Bong Pit, and Bong Sarun 14, and Bong San. In the military, there are a lot of other people who was under the supervision of Son Sen. Counsel, thank you. Son Sen had a few people, as you indicated, to help him when he was absent from work. When Son Sen went to the east on mission, indeed when there was attack and when help was needed in the east, Son Sen had to go there. Did you know that Son Sen went to the east? Response: Yes, I did. He stayed at Suong. Later on, he was relocated to Kampong Cham. Counsel: Thank you. When Son Sen went to the east, according to your knowledge, was anyone appointed to be in his place in his absence, in particular to help him cover the security, national defense matters? Response: I don't know about this because we worked at different ministries. Counsel: Thank you. I have another question to you. You testified that you were on mission with Pol Pot to China. When with Pol Pot and other delegates in China, what were you? What did you, in what capacity did you go there? Response: I went there in my capacity as a person who went to study how things like housing was managed in that country, how tourism was managed. It's more like a trip to study how visitors would be received and welcomed. This is what Ieng Sari told me. I was told to keep my eyes open on how people managed tourists and visitors. He would like me to have some knowledge of things managed in a foreign country. Question: when you went there with Pol Pot during the trip, indeed when the delegates met with senior leaders of China, did you also accompany them to such meeting? Response: No, I didn't attend that meeting because I only attended sessions where movies were shown. Question: there was a meeting before April 1975 on the evacuation of the population from Phnom Penh. You talked to the court already that there was support from Nuon Chea, Khieu Samphan and other senior leaders. Members of the meeting applauded in the meeting to approve the plan to evacuate the population from Phnom Penh. My question is, after such applaud by the members, was the meeting concluded immediately or did it go on? Response. The meeting was concluded by lunchtime. Question. Was there on another occasion that a follow-up meeting was convened to discuss about the evacuation? Response. No. In another meeting, evacuation was no longer the subject matter of the meeting. Question. Did you or were you aware or heard that Pol Pot or Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan talk about the division, the classification of people or the population, officially or unofficially? Response. I never heard of this. Never. Counsel. Thank you. Can you tell the court in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ieng Sari would be the secretary of the party and deputy secretary would be So Hong. My question is whether in other ministry, whether the same structure would be applied as that of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or each different ministry would just follow their own random structure or structuring. Response. Through my observation and through what I heard from friends in other ministries, the organizational structure appeared to be the same. Counsel. Thank you. To the best of your recollection and knowledge of working at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and as a senior individual in the ministry, did you know that these senior people were educated people who were emanating from the Grung? Is that true? Response. Yes, it is. Question. Apart from the senior officers from Grung created by Sihanouk, and other Khmer Rouge senior officers who were assigned from the Khmer Rouge side, did they work or get along together at the ministry when working? Response. The work went smoothly. People were friendly. They were cooperative. There was no problem. Council Sonarun, I have about 2 more questions to put to the witness. Mr. Witness, you testified on the 30th of July, which was yesterday, to the councils for the civil parties that at different locations people were treated differently. Some people received some rice for their meal. Some were offered rice or porridge. And you said that you saw this and reported to Ieng Sari, and on some occasions you met directly with number 1 and told him about this. And he said that such a report should be put or raised in the self-criticism sessions instead. My question is that the party, rather Pol Pot, was of the opinion that the cooperatives could have decent food to eat, and that this happened. Was it the direct order from the superior, or was it the just arbitrary decision by each leader of the cooperative to treat their members of cooperative accordingly? Response. With regard to this, there was no instruction from the superior. People supposed to have enough food to eat. That what would be the simple instruction. In Ratanakiri, we did farming, and we were told to be self-sufficient, self-mastery, and we had to control what we did. For example, like charity begins at home. We had to really care for ourselves first before we care for others. But what I saw was not really the same as what was agreed. I just challenged this practice because I refer to the document, and I said that if this thing happened at the cooperatives, then it was against the core principle, because I saw that people ate porridge with just a few, or mixed with water lily. And I knew that people were badly treated, and it was not really the intention of the party to mistreat the people, and why people were still mistreated. So I believe that these people were not those who were the honest followers of the party's policy. They could have been just a few people who would like to ruin the party That's why they did so to their people. And I noted that it was against the line set by the party. That's why I shared my concern in the meeting. Council, thank you. Time changes from 1970 to 1975. And from 1975 to early 1979, according to your best recollection, to the northeast zone. My question is that during the period from 1975 to 1979, I said there was a change during that period of time. Were there any Vietnamese troops attacking Cambodia, or were there any Cambodian troops attacking the Vietnamese troops in Vietnam? What is your impression on this? Response. In Ratanakiri province, the location is adjacent to Cambodian-Vietnam border. From 1970 through 1978, I did not go to Ratanakiri during the time when I worked with them. However, during the 3-year period, my in-law, who was holding a senior position there, he was a member of the Northeast Zone, and I met him in Phnom Penh. I talked to him. I asked him some questions about the situation there, and he said, before Vietnam had conflicts with us, they asked us to offer them refuge at the Dragon's Tail area. However, after the liberation, Vietnam never gave back the land, and the land is still under the control or in possession of the Vietnamese. And this is the location where I stated I ferry letters to people in the barracks in the location. It belonged to Cambodia, but now it's in the possession of the Vietnamese. And we understood that Vietnamese asked us to offer them refuge on Cambodian territory, but they would give us back after some time. But later on, they never wanted to give us back the land. And at the Oya Dao, along the Se San River, there was also fighting that took place in Cambodian soil. The Vietnamese just said that any land on the other side of the Se San River belonged to them. So this happened only after the liberation. They did never say so before the liberation. And I had a lot of family and relatives who lived in villages in those areas. I went there in 2010 to Pleiku, Yalai, and I asked questions to people about this. And they said that this Khmer land now is Vietnamese land, because after the liberation of 1979, they could take any land they would prefer, because they could really bring their whole troops to to grab the land. I just wish to tell you the details of how I got to know what happened in those locations, and the evidence can be substantiated by my relatives who are still living there. I think this is political issue. I talked to them that it was about politics. You did not need to think about it. We just do farming. That's all. That's what I told my relatives about. Council, thank you, Mr. Witness. Thank you, Mr. President. I think I have no further questions to put to the witness. Since it is now lunch break, may we proceed to my colleague with questions after the adjournment? The President, thank you, Council, and thank you, Mr. Witness. Since it is now appropriate time for the lunch adjournment, we may now adjourn for lunch, and the next session will be resumed by 1:30. Court officer is now instructed to assist the witness in his duty counsel during the lunch adjournment, and have the witness and counsel return to the courtroom by 1:30 p.m. Counsel for Noon Chia, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. Very briefly, I'm just on my feet to make our usual requests. I'm informed that my client is suffering from lower back pain, a headache, and lack of concentration. Accordingly, he would like to attempt to follow the proceedings from the holding cell this afternoon. And one more point on this issue, further to a conversation or a discussion or some submissions that were made on the record on Thursday, and I'm referring specifically to something Judge Cartwright said. The responsibility is, I'm quoting now, the responsibility is yours to raise this issue. That's the issue of a lack of active participation. The responsibility is yours to raise this issue if your client at any point is unable to participate. And I note that my colleague, Major Sonoruan, made that point yesterday in the middle of the morning session. I would just like to note for the record, and perhaps for the purpose of any future application on this point, which may need to be made, I am informed that for a period of time yesterday afternoon, and also for a period of time on Thursday afternoon, our client was not actively participating in the proceedings. And again, let me make it very clear, I'm not criticizing the facilities that have been made available to us. I'm just saying that that's a fact. And I hope and I trust that the Chamber appreciates the difficulty that this may present to us when we're trying to engage in a meaningful way with our client. As I said, that's all I have to say. I'd just like to put that on the record. We may come back to it later. Thank you.
លោកមេធាវីអន្តរជាតិ
The President, International Council for Mr. Noon Chea, could you please clarify your position? Please be more precise on this. Please make your statement clear and simple so that the parties to the proceeding understand what you're wishing to have. Because we appear to also have a problem in noting your clarity in your statement, and also we would like to know now whether it is still uncertain in your statement when you're on your feet. We just would like to know whether it is an application concerning your the request that Noon Chea waives his right to participate in the proceeding, or whether there is any problem in the holding cells, because the chamber needs this clear position so that we can rule whether he has to remain in the courtroom all along or should be returned to the holding cell. And again, please be short and precise. Please try not to make any other statement that not relevant to Mr. Noon Chea, a situation to participate in the proceedings. So please fulfill your role as a counsel representing your client at all stages before the chamber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will do my best. It is my fault indeed for not being clear. Let me state very clearly, Mr. Noon Chea is now suffering from a backache, a headache, and a genuine lack of concentration. The application we make now is that he would like to follow the proceedings from the holding cell this afternoon, and we've prepared the usual waiver. Full stop. The second point I wanted to raise is a more general one, and in that sense, I'm simply trying to make a record and notify the chamber pursuant to the way I understood the instruction from Judge Cartwright that it's my responsibility to put these things on the record. Yesterday, for some period of the afternoon, and Thursday, for some period of the afternoon, our client, I'm informed, was not actively able to participate from the holding cell. Now, I'm simply flagging that. I'm flagging that to make a record for a possible future application. And what I was saying was, I hope, and I trust the chamber sees the potential difficulty of our client experiencing periods of time where he's not able to actively participate. And I'm simply making a record on that point. Today, he's waiving his right. We've taken instructions. We're prepared for our questions. Today, he's happy to retire to the holding cell. I'm simply trying to make a record for the future. Does that clarify things, Mr. President? Judge Cartwright's shaking her head. Could I give you some more information, Judge Cartwright?
The President, the chamber grants the request. Noon Chea can now observe the proceedings from his holding cell for the remainder of the day. The chamber notes that Mr. Noon Chea has waived his right to directly participate in the courtroom. The chamber asks that counsel for Noon Chea produce the waiver signed or given thumbprint by Mr. Nguyen Chia and have it submitted to the chamber as soon as possible. And the AV booth officers are now instructed to ensure that the holding cell is well linked to the audiovisual equipment so that he can observe the proceedings from there. Security personnel are now instructed to bring Nguyen Chia and Khieu Samphan to their respective holding cell and bring Khieu Samphan back to the courtroom by 1:30. The court is adjourned.